Welcome to Abstract Bites. Today, we're diving into a classic trap, a really fascinating phenomenon that explains why the follow-up to a smash hit so often ends up being a complicated mess. It's something that snares even the most brilliant designers, and it's called the second system effect.
So let's start with this really powerful quote from a true giant in software engineering, Frederick Brooks. He wrote this in his legendary book, The Mythical Man-Month. Now, hang on a second. That sounds completely backwards, doesn't it? The most dangerous system? After you've had a big success, shouldn't you be more skilled, more confident, better equipped to knock the next one out of the park? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to unpack. And to really get our heads around this, let's borrow an idea from a totally different world. Let's talk about the difficult second album and that immense pressure musicians feel to top a huge hit. Think about it. That first hit album, or that first successful system, is often so good because it's restrained. The creators are cautious, they're laser focused on solving just one core problem. But then comes the second system. That caution, it gets replaced by a whole lot of confidence. And every single idea that was carefully left on the cutting room floor before comes rushing back in. Suddenly, the project is loaded with frills and it's trying to solve every problem instead of just the essential one. And you know, this isn't just some artistic struggle for musicians. No, it's a perfect analogy for what happens all the time in software, in product design, pretty much any kind of engineering. That exact same pressure, that same temptation to do everything at once, it's a classic trap. And this brings us right to the formal name for this whole thing, coined by Frederick Brooks himself, the second system effect. It's really a story about how confidence can lead directly to complication. See, this whole effect is born from success. After you nail that first project, you feel like you finally get it. You know what you're doing, and so all that healthy caution from the first time around just evaporates. And every brilliant, amazing idea you had to say no to before comes flooding back. Restraint gets totally pushed aside by this desire to build the ultimate, feature-packed masterpiece. You know, the ancient Roman poet Ovid hit the nail on the head centuries ago. He perfectly described how this happens. Each new feature, on its own, seems so small, so harmless. Just one more little bell, one more whistle. But when you just keep adding little to little, you look up and you've suddenly got a big, messy, unmanageable pile. Now, Brooks wasn't just talking theory here. Oh no, he lived this. His primary case study, his big Cautionary Tale, was a massive project he himself managed at IBM. We're talking about the groundbreaking but also notoriously complex operating system/360. Okay, so here's what made OS/360 the absolute perfect storm for this effect. It wasn't just one designer's second system. It was the second system for multiple teams, and each of those teams was coming off their own smaller successful projects. So you had all these groups of super confident architects, all showing up with their own lists of pent-up ideas and favorite features, all ready to build their magnum opus. And the results of this? Well, they were perfectly engineered marvels that were completely obsolete. The team built what Brooks called the last and finest of the dinosaurs, a truly brilliant overlay system right as the entire world was moving on to dynamic memory. They perfected batch debugging just as interactive tools were becoming the standard. And maybe the best example of all, in a classic case of over-engineering, they used precious resident memory for a routine to handle the leap year, an event that happens on the last day of the year only once every 1,461 days. So, if this is such a common and dangerous trap, how in the world do you avoid it? Well, Brooks didn't just diagnose the problem, he actually prescribed a cure. And it all comes down to a set of very conscious, very deliberate disciplines. All right, so this solution, it really starts with just acknowledging the danger exists in the first place, and then practicing some serious self-discipline against adding all those tempting frills. From there, Brooks gives us two really powerful tactics. First, assign a strict budget to every single feature, and second, rely on the wisdom of veterans who've already made these mistakes. You have to make the cost of all that complexity real and tangible by forcing yourself to say, okay, this new feature is worth this many bytes of memory and this many microseconds. You create a strict budget. An idea is no longer just vaguely good, now it has a price tag. And that gives you a crystal clear guide for what actually makes the cut.
And who's the best person to enforce this kind of discipline? An architect who has already built and, more importantly, survived their own second system. A veteran like that has lived through the pain of over-engineering. They've learned the hard lessons. They're way less likely to be seduced by that siren song of endless features because they know what truly matters in the end.
Which brings us to a kind of counterintuitive conclusion here. This kind of discipline, it isn't really a constraint. In a way, it's a form of liberation. The real wisdom, the real genius, is in knowing what to leave out. When you get right down to it, true conceptual integrity doesn't come from packing in a ton of features. It comes from focused simplicity. Real design mastery is having the courage to figure out what's absolutely essential and then bravely leaving everything else out. So as you think about your own work, whether it's writing code, building a presentation, whatever your creative project is, I'll just leave you with this question. It's always easy to add one more thing. The real challenge is, what are you brave enough to leave out?